Hi guys, my name is V and welcome to my book nook. So I think we all know what a huge impact TikTok and specifically BookTok has on what books are more popular and what books should have more attention. So in today's video, I've got a list of books that are popular and that I've read and wanted to discuss with you which ones I think are worth your time and which ones I think you should avoid. Disclaimer, this is just my opinion. I know some of you might love these books that I don't like or dislike books that I do. I don't mean any hate to anyone. This is just my opinion and what I personally enjoyed. So get comfortable, grab a cup of coffee, and let's get started. First up, we have A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. This is a YA mystery trilogy. We follow Pup, who is investigating this murder case that happened in her town about 5 years ago, and she selected this as her topic for her final year project. And basically, when she's investigating, she uncovers some truths and secrets that someone in her town is desperately trying to hide. And there's 2 other books in the same trilogy, but about slightly different mysteries. Personally, I thought it was really good, unpredictable, had a really gripping plot line, and it was just really a good read. Next, we have The Inheritance Games. This is also a trilogy. We follow Avery, who is this really hardworking girl. She has a difficult life and she's really poor. And then all of a sudden, one day, she gets left this huge inheritance by this billionaire. And she has no idea who this is, why this happened to her. And she ends up moving into this billionaire's house where all his grandsons are. And we follow her from there. This one I feel is really worthwhile. It is more on the young adult side. It has a really good plot line, but I did feel like the last book was really unnecessary and this could have really just been a duology. Next up, we have The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. I know a lot of people love this book, and this was my first ever Ali Hazelwood book, but personally I felt like it read too much like a fan fiction and I was too aware that it was. It was still a good time. I just didn't enjoy it as much as all of Ali Hazelwood's other books. And I think that if you don't mind that it might read a little bit Wattpaddy, it is still a pretty good book, a little bit predictable. Next up is Bunny by Mona Awad. This book, I've seen a lot of mixed reviews about it. This book follows a girl, Samantha, who is in this writing program, and she's really an outsider and a loner, and she really wants to join this group of girls in her program. So one day she receives an invite, and when she goes, it ends up not being what she expected, and it ends up almost being like a cult, and the things they do are really weird, and it's really like you're reading a fever dream. So that book I thought was really good, really well done. The ending was one of those where it's not this conclusive ending and you kind of have to draw your own conclusion based on what you think happened in the book. I can't really say much without giving it away, but I really enjoyed it. I've seen a lot of mixed reviews about Bunny, but I think it's really worth your time and it's really different from a lot of the other books out there. The next book that I read is Everything I Know About Love by Dolly Alderton. This is her memoir, and this book basically deals with how, at the end of the day, the big loves of your life are your female friendships, and that's what she took away from her life. I thought this was such a good book. I spoke about it a lot more in my January wrap up, but I think this book is really worth your time, especially if you are a young girl in your 20s. I think it just has a lot of good insight and she just articulates so many feelings in such a good way. Next book that I read was Twisted Love. This is a contemporary romance. We follow Alex, who is this rich, prudy guy, and Ava, who is the complete opposite, and she's all sunshines. And Alex is forced to take care of her because Ava's brother is not going to be there, and Alex is Ava's brother's best friend. Personally, I don't like this. I know this series gets a lot of hype and people love it, but I didn't like it. I found the writing to be a little bit on the poor side. The plot, at least for the first half, was kind of boring. Not much really happened. It really just wasn't what I was expecting, and I just didn't feel that it was worth the read. But I have heard that the rest of the series gets a lot better, but I have yet to pick any of them up. Next up, we have The American Roommate Experiment. This book follows, I think her name is Rosie, and she is an engineer turned romance author who is suffering from writer's block. When everything in her life is going wrong, she moves into her best friend's apartment because her best friend is not supposed to be there, and she finds out that her best friend's cousin is already living there, and they end up becoming unlikely roommates. He then proposes this idea to take her on a series of dates to help her get over her writer's block. So, this is by the author of The Spanish Love Deception, and I went into this book with such high hopes because the premise sounded good. It sounded like it's just going to be a cute, good time, and I was just disappointed. It was so boring, and it took me so long to finish this book because I don't like to DNF a book, but it was just so boring and not much really happened, and just I personally wouldn't recommend this. Next up is A Million Kisses in Your Lifetime. Again, this is a contemporary romance. It's a bad boy, good girl trope. They are paired up for a psychology assignment, and this was okay. Again, nothing revolutionary. It's just a okay plot, okay writing, nothing great. I did find some of the scenes to be a bit icky, and I didn't really like it, but it wasn't bad. It was just okay. A book that was much more than okay is Better Than the Movies by Lynn Painter. This book is such a good book. It's a little bit on the cheesy side, but if you are a rom-com person and you enjoy rom-com movies, this book is perfect for you. It is a typical rom-com movie plotline, and it's just written so well, and I just had such a good time. Next up, we have The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. This is a historical fiction, and this one deserves all the hype that it gets. It is such a refreshing book. We follow this reclusive Hollywood star, Evelyn Hugo, and she has requested this writer, Monique, to interview her, and basically she's revealing the scandals and everything that has led to her being this famous, amazing person that she is. And it was just such a good book. This is a book that shows you that historical fiction is not necessarily boring, because it was such a good, refreshing book, and I just really, really enjoyed this one. Book that I did not enjoy was Every Summer After. I really thought this was going to be such a good book, but I just personally felt like, for the most part, it was okay. It's just the plot line at the end just wasn't a trope that I like. Next, we have another book that I didn't really like was They Both Die at the End. The plot of this book sounds so amazing. It's just the execution fell flat. I felt the characters were very one-dimensional, and I didn't really connect with any of them. You would expect it to be a little bit more on the deeper side, and I just didn't feel like the conversations were realistic or anything like that. Basically, this book is set in this world where on the day you're going to die, you get a phone call. So these two strangers both get a phone call that they're going to die that day, and they meet up and end up, forming this friendship and more than that. But I personally didn't really like this one. Next up, we have Shatter Me, which is a dystopian book. This is a YA trilogy. There's like 10 books, I think, in this one. We follow this girl, Juliet, who has this power where if she touches someone, they'll die. So she's been locked up in this asylum, and someone finally gets her out, and we follow her from there. I really enjoyed the entire series, but I do know that it's not for everyone. The style of writing I thought was good. It was very different, and for the time period that it was written, it was well done. But I do know that a lot of people don't take to it, so it's more of an acquired taste. But if you can, I would really suggest at least reading the first 3 books in this series, because there's a lot. There's like 10 books, and I think there's more coming out, but I just really enjoyed this one. Next up, we have Once Upon a Broken Heart. This is just yes, 100% yes. If you haven't read this book, please read this book. This is amazing. This is everything. It's a trilogy. We follow this girl, Evangeline. The person that she's in love with is marrying someone else. So she makes a deal with this fate, the Prince of Hearts, to stop the wedding. And everything just goes very wrong from there. It's amazing. It's magical. I just reread this in January, and this is one of the best fantasy series I've ever read. So this deserves all the hype. It's just phenomenal. Next is The Cruel Prince, which follows Jude, who is a human that's stuck in the world of fairy, and how she basically doesn't fit in and just really wants to prove herself. So This trilogy, again, I really enjoyed. It is, again, more on the younger, young adult side, but really, this is worth your time, especially if you are into fantasy. Two fantasies I want to talk about are Fourth Wing and Powerless. I didn't say these were good books, but I liked them. Okay, they're not the best written. The plot is very basic, but the vibes are there, and I think that it's a good time. I would recommend these more if you're not very big on fantasy. If you are more a romance person or read other genres and want to get into fantasy, I feel like Powerless or even Fourth Wing are really good books to start with and to get you into it. But I feel like if you are an avid fantasy reader, the plot lines of this might feel a little bit undercooked and a bit disappointing, but the vibes are there, and I personally had a good time. It may not be the best written books, but I still thought they are okay books. Up we have, okay, I don't have the first book, but this is the second book in the A Course of Thorns and Roses series. This series, I know a lot of people have been having issues with lately, but I love them. They are what got me into reading, especially fantasy, and I really did enjoy them. We follow a 19-year-old Fair, and she has killed a wolf. She hunts to help keep her family from starving, and this wolf was tied up with some other things that end up making her or forcing her to move to the land of the Fae, this magical land, and she has to leave her family behind, and she is now stuck living there, and we follow her journey from there. I love Akata. It's just a staple in fantasy, and I really did think that it was worthwhile when I did read it. The next book is First Lie Wins. This is a thriller. It follows this girl named Evie who basically has the perfect life, the perfect house, the perfect everything, but there's one catch is that Evie doesn't exist. So this is such a good book. It really has you thinking as the plot goes, and I would highly recommend this one. There are so many more books that I could talk about. These are just the main ones that I see people talking about a lot, and I didn't want to repeat anything that I've already spoken about. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you agree with any of my opinions, comment down below, and I will see you guys soon.